Hi, and thanks for joining me for another Roman video. Today I'm looking at a well-preserved Roman bathhouse on the very edge of Roman Empire. When the Emperor Hadrian died in AD 138, his named successor, Antoninus Pius, decided to take the Roman Empire north again. Antoninus was not a military man, more an administrator, so a push north to conquer the lands in what is now known as Scotland would have been a way of consolidating his place on the throne. The wall that bears his name was built of timber and turf. Starting in AD 142, it would have taken about 3 years to build and was roughly 40 miles long. The bathhouse we'll be looking at today sits in the fort of Bearsden, which is to the northwest of the city of Glasgow. The fort, then standing in fields and in a rural setting, was first noted in the 1600s, and then excavations took place from 1973 onwards. It was soon discovered that the bathhouse sat in an annex to the east of the main fort. Annexes could be used as stockades for supplies and also buildings that may be prone to fire. To supply the forts along the Antonine Wall, the Romans built the Roman Military Way, and today it's still used and called Roman Road. You can still enter what would have been the fort via this street. On the site are two bathhouses, but the first was never completed, probably used as a mess room and then demolished and its stones used to rebuild the second and longer lived bathhouse. The Roman bather would have entered the bathhouse and got changed in the wooden changing room, here marked out by posts, and then would have entered the stone section of the bathhouse, which had 8 rooms. In this artist's impression, you can see the wooden changing room off to the left. The stone bathhouse would have been roofed in wooden shingles, its walls whitewashed and plastered. You can see the north wall of the fort, which was also the Antonine Wall. If you look, you can see the fine broaching on the stones, probably to help the plaster adhere to the outer walls. After changing down and possibly exercising, the soldier would have entered the laconicum, or hot, dry steam room. The idea was to open the pores and let the sweat out so grime could be cleaned off the skin. In the north wall of the building, you can still see the stoke hole where a fire would have been lit. The heated air would then be drawn underneath the floor and then up box flue tiles all the way and out through the ceiling. When excavated, the paved floor was still intact partially, and you can still see the raised floor where the air would have run under the voids. The floor, when in use, would have been so hot the bather would have had to have worn bath clogs or brought their own sandals in from the changing room. It's still possible to crouch down and look into the voids underneath the heated floor. The next place would have been the tepidarium, or warm room, and here a small niche with its original cement still in place, which would hold a statue or maybe a fountain. From here the bather would have proceeded through a succession of hotter rooms leading into the coldarium, or hot room. In the hot room, or coldarium, the hypocaust, or raised floor, has disappeared. However, you can still see the spacing slabs against the wall. This would have allowed the air to rise up towards the ceiling, warming the walls as well as the floors. The bather would have covered themselves in olive oil and then scraped down their skin with a strigil to remove all the dirt before finally using the hot plunge at this end of the building. At the east end of the building, up below the coldarium, a stoke hole was built to supply the hot air for the underfloor heating. There also would have been a large water tank here which would have heated up the water to put into the hot plunge. Because of the steam and the heat, all the furniture inside the bathhouse would have had to have been in stone. Several bench legs were found within the ruins, like this example found at Vindolanda in 2019. Once the bather had finished having a sweat and a hot soak, they would have returned through the rooms heading towards the cold plunge. The cold plunge has survived remarkably well, and the excavators still even found a clay bung in the plug hole. Even now, plaster still adheres to the walls of the pool. You can still imagine the bathers sitting on this small step inside the pool, chatting and passing the time of day. To the southeast of the bathhouse is one of the most important rooms in the fort. This was the 9-seater latrine for these soldiers. The drain runs from the bathhouse and would have been regularly flushed out with hot water as they emptied out the hot plunge. The interior of the latrines haven't survived, having been made of wood. The drain then emptied out the waste through a culvert in the wall of the fort. Excavation of the fort ditch have revealed large amounts of moss. This would have been how the soldiers wiped their bottoms. It's highly unlikely that Mediterranean sponges on sticks, as seen in many of the reenactments, would have been found this far north. Pottery smashed vessels were found inside the bathhouse. This was possibly for food or snacks, but it's also entirely possible they were used as chamber pots, as a walk out from the bathhouse, if caught short, was inconvenient. The Antonine Wall was occupied for maybe 20 years before the troops returned and occupied Hadrian's Wall in the early AD 160s. Apart from a few invasions, including Severus's Great Invasion in the 3rd century, the wall was never occupied again. Evidence shows that the fort was burned down and completely demolished before the troops headed south once more. The bathhouse is free to visit under the care of Historic Scotland at any reasonable time of day. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. You can find more at Bearsden, The Story of the Roman Fort by David J. Breeze, produced by Archaeopress, available online or through bookshops.